let's talk about the process of, and it's really great because our audience tonight, they might want to be your client, right? So they're thinking, hey, what is it like to be Ben's client? So what happens when, at the end of a year, like when does this podcast, I want a podcast, I want to do a podcast now. So when do they get the product? And I'm saying that because like they just don't know what goes into it if they've never done it.
And that's fine. For normal practice, if you and I had a conversation today and we decided next week, yes, this is something we're going to go ahead with, we're probably 8 to 10 weeks before the first episode goes live, because realistically, you're going to want to record 3 or 4 episodes ahead of time, if not 5 or 6, for a couple different reasons. Mm-hmm. One, it looks far better when you launch a podcast that there's 5 or 6 episodes that it launches. It doesn't just launch with a pilot episode.
Right.
Number 2, you always want to make sure you have 2 or 3 episodes in the can, ready to go. I get sick. A customer gets sick. Somebody has to cancel last minute on an interview, whatever, that you have something that's already done that you could just fill in for that week.
Right.
And it all depends. Some people want a daily podcast. Some people want a weekly podcast. Some people want a podcast every 2 weeks. You can be flexible based on the number of podcasts you do, but there's lots of things that go into a great podcast, and there's artwork that needs to go there. There's creative brief to decide, what do we want this podcast to be about?
Yeah.
Why are you doing a podcast? And it's the number one question I ask somebody. What do you want to do with a podcast, and what's your goal? What do you want to get out of getting this podcast?
Yeah.
And it's got to be a specific articulated goal. Well, I want more clients. Well, how many clients do you want? What type of clients do you want? What do you want these clients to buy from you? How do you want these clients to feel about you? How do you want these clients to refer other people to you? And we need to go through all those things, and that takes time for the conversation. Then there's, you have to build an intro, you have to build an outro, you have artwork for the show, you have to set up a website that's going to speak to the thing. There's making sure that it gets on some hosting platform. Then you want to make sure that it's going to be ready to go out on iHeart and Spotify and iTunes and all that kind of stuff, and making sure you get into the system. So realistically, you're probably talking 8 to 10 weeks to make sure that it's done right. Now, I've done them in 6 weeks.
Right.
It's a little hairy to do it in 6 weeks, but it's doable.
Right.
But you need to have a client that's completely on board and is ready to go now. And they're willing to roll up their sleeves and take care. And you also have to say, does the client have the equipment to do the podcast? Do we need to go buy them? Do we need to go buy them a microphone? Do they need a windscreen? Do they need a boom? Are we doing a video, or are we just doing audio? And be able to, do we need to create a backdrop for them?
Great
what
points.
Are the things that they need?
See, these are all the things, Joe, if we're taking notes now, if our clients are taking notes and our listeners are taking notes, they have to play this again and again and again to make a list of everything that Ben just said. Ben, we call that conception to conversion. Yes. You just gave them everything that they need to know before they go and put this together. It's not just an iPhone or whatever.
No, and too many. I mean, here's the thing. There's 750 or 800,000 podcasts around the world.
Yep.
In supposedly about 100 different languages. The majority of those podcasts never make it past the 10th episode.
Yep.
And the reason for that being is lack of organization.
Yep.
People not realizing how difficult it is to keep it going. It's like writing a book.